welcome to another episode of Pharmacy IR. We have a very special treat for you today. We are joined by the one and only Dr. Bob Cisneros, who is an associate professor of pharmacy practice at Campbell University, and is celebrating his recent retirement after 16 years here at Campbell. So thanks so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
I was going to introduce sort of your educational and career history, but it is a little long and complicated, so I'll leave it to you so I don't mess anything up. But if you could just tell us a little bit about where you've done your education and where you've worked.
Sure. I went to pharmacy school in Louisiana, and then it was called Northeast Louisiana University, NLU. Not today, it's University of Louisiana Monroe, ULM. But I went to pharmacy school there, then completed a residency in hospital pharmacy at UAB, University of Alabama, and Birmingham hospitals. And then from there, I went to Auburn and had completed a master's degree in, the focus was on hospital pharmacy. Mm-hmm. Then I actually taught for a couple of years at the University of South Carolina, Columbia. And then I went back to Birmingham, and I worked for about the next 15 to 17 years in hospital pharmacy at both UAB and at St. Vincent's Hospital. And then along the way, I went to UAB at night and got a MBA degree. And then around 1999, decided to go back to Auburn for 4 years in the PhD program there, which was in the area of pharmacy administration, and completed that in 2003. And then I came here to Campbell, and I've been here since, March of 2003, but I actually started teaching in the fall of 2003.
Okay.
And that P1 class was a class of 2007.
Well, it's exciting.
Yeah.
It's a long time to stay at Campbell, so you must have really liked it.
I did. It appealed to me. The reason I wanted to go back to graduate school and actually come here was because of students and teaching. And I think Campbell and the College of Pharmacy here really gave me that opportunity.
Fantastic. So tell me a little bit about the main features of your job over the years and what sort of has made your position or your practice unique.
Well, when I came here, I started teaching the healthcare systems course, mm-hmm. which dealt with Medicare and Medicaid and so forth. And it kind of evolved over the years to where I actually started having the students use the online Medicare Plan Finder. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of proud of that because I actually got hands-on experience in using it and, discovering a lot of neat things about Medicare Part D programs and how to use it so they could be of more help to students or to patients. Mm-hmm. That course changed a little bit with a new curriculum, but I think the basic elements of it stood the same. I also taught the management course. The healthcare systems course was all fall semester, and the management course was all spring semester for P1s, and that's how it started. The new curriculum changed that a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then I was interested in medication errors, and I got involved in a lot of things related to that at the hospitals I've worked at. So right off the bat, I wanted to teach an elective on medication errors, mm-hmm. and I started that in the fall of 2003 too. And I've continued with that course. And the last year or two, I actually started teaching it not just in the fall, but in the spring.
Wow.
And hopefully it's been useful and helpful. And I think the students have enjoyed being part of it.
Yeah, and I didn't take that course of yours, but I still remember one of your lectures when we did it in P1 year about medication errors, and those always stick with me. So. Yeah,
well, what I tried to do is not everybody takes any one elective, and not everybody took the medication errors elective. So I tried to incorporate, more of it into the required courses mm-hmm. I taught. And even that course kind of evolved over the years. So the last few years, what I actually had students do, I'd put the students in a group, and each group I provided information about a particular person and a real error mm-hmm. that happened. And each group had to do kind of a mini root cause analysis. And during the last one or two classes of the course, each group had to stand up and do like a PowerPoint presentation talking about what happened, why did it happen, what were the weaknesses in the system mm-hmm. that led to the error, and how they would fix the system to keep the error from happening again. And some folks told me that was really the best part of the course, that they actually could have, a real error to think about. And the errors were quite real, and several involve infants who died because of mistakes. So I think it really was, I'm glad I incorporated that.
Yeah. So I think I already know the answer that you're going to give, but if you could tell me what the best aspects of your job have been over the years.
Well, for me, it's been fun being able to connect with the students, and I think that was one of the biggest reasons I left my hospital positions in Birmingham, went back to graduate school, and came here, just to be able to connect more with the students and share what experience I had. And over the years, I think one of the most favorite things I'd been doing was at Thanksgiving. When I worked in Birmingham, I grew up in New Orleans, so it was hard to actually go home for any holiday.
Sure. Because
of the schedule and the fact that I'd just about have to fly and come right back. And when I was working there on holidays, I had some friends who would take me in on most holidays. So when it comes to Christmas or Thanksgiving, most of the time I was with some friends and their family. It wasn't like I had to spend it alone. And I always thought if I had a chance, I'd kind of pay it forward to do the same, like for students.
Right.
And at Thanksgiving here, in the old curriculum especially, there were a lot of students who couldn't go home for Thanksgiving because the finals were immediately after Thanksgiving, like the Monday after Thanksgiving. So I offered to take anybody who wanted to out to eat at Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And we had almost, I'd say in the 16 years here, I probably did it about 13 times.
Wow.
And we always had a group. Sometimes it was 2 or 3. Sometimes it got as many as 15 or close to 20. But it was fun. Lots of time. Most of the time we went to Cracker Barrel, and at around noontime for a meal, and it was packed. We always had to wait. And then I always ordered some pies from, or not pies, but pumpkin ice cream pie from Sunny Skies.
Yep.
And had a couple of those. So after we ate at Thanksgiving, our meal, usually at Cracker Barrel, with the students that wanted to could come back to my house, and I broke out the pumpkin ice cream pie, and we watched a Christmas movie. Elf was a big favorite.
Oh yeah.
So it was a lot of fun. Cool. And that's one of the most special things I remember that I've done, and it always meant a lot to me, and I think for the students who were able to come.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So being so involved in the academia side of pharmacy, what challenges do you see facing pharmacy schools today?
Yeah, well, I think one of the most obvious ones that we all talk about faculty-wise has to do with the number of pharmacy schools, the demand for pharmacists, the fact that it seems like the pendulum has started swinging the other way about the ease in finding jobs, because at least at the time we're talking, a lot of the students are finding it more difficult to find a job, and at least to find a job where they want. And certainly that impacts, admissions to schools, and the question often comes up, should there be more of a restriction on the number of pharmacy schools that are opening in the country? Should there be more restriction on the number of pharmacy students that are admitted to school? So, I think those are some of the biggest issues now facing, from the academic side, facing pharmacy.
For students who have an interest in academia, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think sometimes it's hard to separate academia from pharmacy practice because, you're teaching students when you have a practice site. But I think for academia, being able to get as much experience as you can in speaking and teaching, and to really have a special area that have expertise in, and not to be so general that you can't dig beneath the surface on whatever topic you talk about. Okay. So I would encourage people who want to go off into practice and then become academic or a faculty member to really identify one particular area that they really love, that they can really sink their teeth into. And I think that helps when you're lecturing students.
Yeah.
And students can usually sense if you're a real expert in something, or, if you're just hitting the surface on a topic.
Sure. Speaking of students, what would you say is the concepts that they mostly struggle with when they've taken your courses?
I think, in the healthcare systems course, I think students that don't have much experience in pharmacy are a little bit bewildered by things like Medicare and Medicaid, Medicare Part D. And I think that takes time. I think most students never fail any of the courses I teach. But I think the students that struggle a little bit are the ones that don't have a lot of experience and can't relate to things related to the healthcare system and insurance. So I know when we had some international students at Campbell a few years ago, they kind of struggled with that course because they just weren't familiar with the healthcare system.
Yeah.
And they did perfectly fine because they took the medication error elective too. And in a way, I guess it really didn't surprise me, but all the things we worry about and errors, the same concerns they had back at home overseas, the same kinds of errors. But I think those were the biggest struggle. In the management course, sometimes it's a little pretend, because there are some students in the management course who have experience as managers before they came to pharmacy school. So sometimes it takes, a little bit of taking it seriously to really understand about the complexities of management and what they have to know. And lots of times in the management course, I tried to focus a little bit on the student organizations that they were part of and how the topics we talked about even at that time could help them be officers in the courses that they took.
Yeah. I think a realization for me was if you are going to school to become a pharmacist, you're also going to become a manager, whether that's something you want to do or you don't, just as the nature of the career.
Sure.
So,
I mean, you have to be a manager because even if you don't have the title of manager in a pharmacy, you have to manage yourself, you have to manage a technician, you have to manage maybe a student, manage maybe other pharmacists. So there's a management part of a pharmacist's job, even if a person's not the pharmacist in charge or the manager in charge.
Do you have any resources that you use regularly that you would recommend for students to check out? I know the book that we read in the healthcare course, The Healing of America, I found to be very useful. Do you have anything else like that you can recommend?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the book, because in the healthcare course, there really wasn't a required text except for that one. And that one was more of it was a book about the healthcare systems of other countries. And I was a little reluctant years ago to make it a required text in the course, because I thought, well, we'd have people screaming at each other in class about whether they agreed with the author or not, because he was fairly liberal in how he approached it. But actually, I think it turned out to be really well, and most all the students really enjoyed reading it, because it talked about how, like how the healthcare systems in a couple of different countries developed, and talked about some of the things that we believe about them that really aren't true, and it talked about some of the weaknesses. But I think just in terms of the healthcare system, just really keeping up with the news, keeping up with what's going on in healthcare in the country. Right now, the Affordable Care Act is on its way out. Who knows what healthcare system we'll have in the next couple of years. So I would encourage people to stay tuned with what's going on in the world. I mean, and particularly in this country when it comes to healthcare and the debates going on in Congress. Because this could be a good time to really be watching that, because things are changing.
Right.
And let's see, in the medication errors, one thing I always relied on was the ISMP, the Institute for Safe Medication Practices. And I help them a little bit because I'm a reviewer for one of their newsletters. And that is a great resource for finding out about errors that are happening, finding out about recommendations for how to avoid errors. And for me, when I was still working in hospital pharmacy, just knowing what kind of errors were happening really helped me a lot, because when I was preparing a drug that I had read about, a bad error from happening, it would help me prevent, it would help keep me from, making the same kind of errors.
Sure. I want to shift gears a little bit and move into more of your personal life, what led you to pharmacy, how you grew up, that sort of thing. So.
Sure. Well, I came from a pharmacy family.
Okay.
My parents met in pharmacy school at Loyola University in New Orleans in the 1940s. Now, Loyola closed its pharmacy school in the 60s, but my parents met there. And my father, though, had retinitis pigmentosa, which was an eye disease, and he became blind a little bit later, and never, in my lifetime, I can't really remember him working as a pharmacist, but my mother ended up working as a hospital pharmacist. Both of my grandfathers were pharmacists. My father's father in Texas, I never really knew, but he had a drugstore in Texas, and my mother's father in Louisiana, in New Orleans, worked both in the hospital and in retail. In fact, my mother and her father were two of the original members of the ASHP.
Oh, wow.
And in fact, I think it was in 1975 the ASHP sent all of those original members a plaque to honor them. And I can remember both of them receiving a plaque, but Hurricane Katrina kind of took all those away. They're not around. But I can remember my grandfather in New Orleans telling me about some of his experiences. When he worked, he owned a drugstore in New Orleans back in the 1920s or 30s. And my mother would tell me that when he bought the pharmacy, there was one section in the pharmacy, and it seemed like the products in that section always sold. So he kept stocking it. And a lot of the other pharmacists in the city didn't like the fact that he had that section. My mother said that section basically contained things related to voodoo, like candles and things like that.
Yeah.
And people would come in to buy that.
Yeah.
And but he also worked as a pharmacist in what was called the Old French Hospital in New Orleans. And I can remember him telling me that when it was slow, the doctors would come down and ask him to help do autopsies.
Wow.
And he said, yeah, they use kite string to help with that. But he had a lot of different experiences like that. And also, he helped start a baseball league for the pharmacists in New Orleans. So I think this went on maybe in the 1940s or thereabouts, but I saw a newspaper article about it. And all the pharmacies, or several of them, they'd meet like at 5:30 in the morning and have a baseball game. They'd have two teams that would play each other, probably, every game.
Yeah.
And then at the end of their season, they'd have a World Series, and it's the same two teams playing each other. And the team that lost would have to buy like dinner. They'd go out and have a big dinner. But it was the same people playing each other all the time.
Yeah.
But it was, they'd go out to City Park early in the morning before work and play.
So who were you as a student?
My mother actually had me helping, well, first of all, even before I worked as a pharmacist, she'd take me there, I guess, to keep me out of trouble at home. So
Put you to work.
On weekends when she had to work. So I'd play in the back, I thought mercury was so cool. You could hit it and it would bounce into so many pieces.
It's a miracle you're still alive.
I know. Fortunately, it didn't affect me too much.
Yeah.
And then later I started working on weekends in the pharmacy, helping. And actually when I started out in school, I was in biology in college. And then it wasn't like I set out in life to be a pharmacist. But gradually, it interested me more and more, and I ended up going to pharmacy school.
But were you good? Were you studying, or were you a slacker? Tell me about.
Oh, you mean when I?
Yeah, tell me about you as a student.
In pharmacy?
Yeah.
Or no, as a pharmacy student, it was really different. I can remember, going to school for a lot of the first semester wearing a shirt and tie, and it was a lot more formal. And but I tried real hard. I was not in any of the pharmacy fraternities then in pharmacy school. But yeah, I made a lot of close friends in pharmacy school. It was different. Rotations, I think, were probably so much different than they are now. It wasn't as clinical as it is. We had I remember one of the courses was pharmacognosy, which probably is no longer taught, about plants and things. And,
Oh, okay.
yeah, I can remember sitting there watching slides, and that's another thing, slides, of, not PowerPoints. One of the professors who taught pharmacognosy spent time in South America collecting plants and things, and we heard a lot about that.
Wow.
So, and then in the summers I'd come back to New Orleans and, work with my mother in the hospital pharmacy there, which was about a 200 or 300 bed hospital. It was a Catholic hospital, and everybody was really close. And so I'd work there during the summers and some weekends.
Cool.
So it was fun.
So tell me about the organizations that you are involved in both pharmacy or non-pharmacy.
Yeah, well, I had been involved a lot with the ASHP for a lot of years, and I've kind of backed off of that. So probably professionally, the American Association of Colleges of Pharmacy has been the main pharmacy professional organization I've been involved with, and I've been part of their special interest group. So I've been part of the ethics special interest group, and 1 year I was the elected chair of the healthcare ethics SIG group. I'm still involved with it. I'm involved with the task force right now, trying to decide something about the structure of the special interest groups. I've been involved with the pharmacy history special interest group, and occasionally I've been involved with some of the summer programs.
Okay.
Not too long ago, the special interest group, the ethics special interest group, collaborated with the geriatric special interest group, and to do a program about how to incorporate ethics into issues related to geriatrics. And then more recently, the ethics special interest group combined with the pharmacogenomics special interest group to do a presentation about ethics-related issues. Because I was a course coordinator for one of the pharmacogenomics special interest groups just this past semester, which Dr. Perkins was a part of.
Oh, it's an interesting sort of new frontier, I guess. It's always important to remember that we have to be ethical as we develop all these new technologies and stuff. So.
Oh, sure, and it really is important for pharmacists. You might think, well, what do you have to talk about ethics for pharmacists where, the Gallup poll, we're always one of the most liked professions, but if you look at the other side of the picture, it doesn't take much to search on the internet and find pharmacists that are arrested for fraud, for Medicare, Medicaid fraud, which runs into the billions. I mean, people want to save money in the healthcare system. Well, if you'd eliminate fraud, you'd save, literally millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Wow.
But, and I think there's a lot of temptation in pharmacy. And reimbursement is always a topic of, a lot of concern and worry. Reimbursement isn't getting better. The cost of drugs is getting higher, and reimbursement is getting lower. So I think ethics is something that we need to talk about in pharmacy.
Definitely. And
now, with the new curriculum, it's part of the law course. It's called Law and Ethics now.
Well, I think that's getting to the end of our time here, but thank you so much for joining us.
Sure.
And we're actually going to bring you back to play a little game with us in just a moment. So
sure.
Thanks, everyone.
Glad to. Thanks.